everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, thanks for stopping by. I hope you will consider subscribing. So today I have another fun canning video for you. We're going to be taking another recipe from the Food in Jars Canning Cookbook. This is a tested and trusted recipe book for canning. All the recipes in it are safe, so it would be a good one to have on your shelf if you don't have it already. I will leave a link for you in the description box below so that you can easily find it on Amazon. And when you purchase through my link, I make a small commission from Amazon too. So anyway, that'll be below my video for you. So we are going to be making something yummy for all of our summer barbecues. We are going to be making sweet and sour pickled red onions. So perfect for topping burgers and dogs, hot dogs, bratwursts. You can put them on salads. You can garnish deviled eggs with them. So lots of yummy ways to use them, and they are absolutely beautiful in the jar. Now this recipe is water bath or steam canning. It's entirely up to you. If you followed my channel very long, you know that I love steam canning, so I will be demonstrating steam canning today, but this recipe is also safe for water bath canning. Just as an FYI, for those of you who are new to steam canning, any canning recipe that is safe for water bath canning is also safe for steam canning. So water bath and steam canning are interchangeable processes for tested recipes. So for the recipe, this recipe, by the way, makes approximately 3 pint jars. In my experience, I had a little bit more than that. But instead of processing in pint jars, I'm going to be processing mine in half pint jars, simply because it's just me and I don't need a whole pint of pickled red onions when I open them. I'm probably not going to use them fast enough unless I'm entertaining. So I'm going to be canning in half pint jars. It is totally safe to go down in size. You just can't go up in size when you are following a tested recipe. The processing time is going to be the same for either a pint jar or a half pint jar, but again, I'm going to be demonstrating half pint jars. So you're going to need 2 cups of apple cider vinegar. Anytime we're pickling and we're using vinegar, please make sure you read the label. It must be at least 5% acidity to be considered safe to be used for canning. So make sure you check out that label. Some of the vinegars can be deceiving, so it's really important to confirm that it's at least 5% acidity. We need 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar, 2 tablespoons of pickling salt. I highly recommend that you do use pickling salt in this case. Pickling salt is a pure salt. If you choose to use other types of salt, it can make your brine look cloudy. So I highly recommend using the canning and pickling salt wherever it's called for. We need 3 pounds of red onions, trimmed and thinly sliced. I did mine by hand, but using a mandolin would be a fantastic way to do them. 2 teaspoons of mustard seed, a teaspoon of celery seed, and 1/2 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. Just to mention on the dried spices here, it's totally safe to adjust them any way you'd like. You can reduce the amount, you can increase the amount some if that's what you choose to do. Dried spices are safe to change up in canning recipes. So you do what you think will work best for you and what will appeal to your palate. Just a note on canning and the question of sterilizing jars. We are no longer required to sterilize jars as long as we're processing for 10 minutes or more. This recipe calls for 10 minutes of processing time, so you do not need to pre-sterilize your jars and lids. I just washed mine and set them aside, set my lids aside. The jars I kept hot in my canner while I was prepping my other ingredients. So I'm going to bring you in close and we're going to get started. Okay guys, here we go. We're gonna start by making our brine. I have 2 cups of apple cider vinegar in my saucepan. I'm going to add 1.5 cups of water, 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and 2 tablespoons of pickling salt. We're going to stir that to combine, and we're going to bring the mixture up to a boil. Once we get our mixture up to a boil, we are going to add our onions, reduce the heat to a simmer, and just let them simmer just a few minutes to soften. When we get there, I'll bring you back. Okay guys, our brine has come up to a boil, so now it's time to carefully add our onions. And that was 3 pounds of thinly sliced sweet red onions. We're going to give that a stir. I'm going to reduce my heat to a medium, and we're just going to let those simmer for just a few minutes to start to soften. All right, while our onions are coming up to a simmer, we're gonna put together our spice blend. So in my bowl here, I have 2 teaspoons of mustard seed. To that, we are going to add 1 teaspoon of celery seed. And then about 1/4 teaspoon or so of red pepper flakes. You can control the heat here. If you want a little more heat, you could always add more. If you don't want any heat, you can leave it all out. You could add less, whatever you want to do here. We're just going to mix that all together. And then we're going to distribute this evenly into our jars. You want to put it in first, and then we'll fill it with the pickles and then our brine. All right, I am going to start with hot jars. So we're going to take our seasoning or spice mix, and we're going to distribute it evenly amongst all of our jars. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Just do the best you can with that. All right, my onions have come up to a simmer, so now we're ready to add our onions to the jars. So we are going to, as evenly as possible, divide our onions between our jars, and we're just going to use some tongs to get them in there. We are going to pack our jars to about 1/2 inch headspace. All right, so I did use my tongs to pack my onions to about 1/2 inch headspace. Before we add our brine, I am going to add some pickle crisp or calcium chloride. That's gonna help to keep my onion slices a little bit crispy. The instructions for using this are at about 1/8 teaspoon per pint. I am obviously doing 1/2 pint jars here, so you need just a tiny bit. I'm using 1/4 teaspoon, and I'm trying to use less than 1/8 teaspoon for each of my jars. So we're going to put that in first. You just need a tiny bit per jar. All right, then we are going to top our jars off to 1/2 inch headspace with our brine. All right, then her instructions say to gently tap your jars on a towel-lined countertop to get things to settle before you debubble. All right, so once you've tapped your jars, we're going to use a debubbling tool, plastic butter knife, or chopstick to finish releasing your air bubbles. And again, we are looking for 1/2 inch headspace. So if you feel like your headspace changes after you debubble, you can add more brine if you need to, or if you feel like you have too many onions, you can take a few out. It's kind of hard to get it exactly right because we're dispersing the onions evenly. But if you lightly pack them to about 1/2 inch headspace to start with before you add the brine, it turns out to be just about right. But sometimes, like in the case of this jar, you may, once you release your air bubbles, you may need a bit more brine. Make sure you do have enough brine in your jar to cover the onions on top. The onions should be covered with brine. They shouldn't be sticking out of the brine. All right, once you're at the correct headspace, you're going to take a paper towel and wipe the rims of your jars. We don't want anything interfering with getting a good seal. A paper towel dipped in white vinegar works really well here. Once you've cleaned the rims of your jars, you are going to center your lids. And then add your bands to fingertip tight. And in the canner they go. All right, I have my jars, all my jars in my canner. I started my canner with 3 quarts of simmering water in the bottom of my canner. Those are the instructions for my steam canner. I am steam canning. You can steam can or water bath can this recipe. If you are going to water bath can it, you want to make sure you have enough water in your canner to cover your jars by at least 1 inch. You're going to bring it to a full rolling boil before you start your processing time. If you're using a steam canner like I'm using here, you have a dial gauge on the top that has a green zone on there that tells you when to start your processing time. Either way, once you get to your full rolling boil with water bath canning, or you're in your green zone for steam canning, you just want to maintain that. So you need to reduce your heat just to maintain the full rolling boil, or stay in your green zone with your steam canner. We are going to process for 10 minutes, and when we get there, I'll bring you back. All right, guys, we are all done. I processed for the 10 minutes like I told you, and then I left my jars in my canner. I let them sit for an additional 5 to 10 minutes, remove the lid, and then let them sit for a few minutes more. Allowing your jars to cool at a slower rate helps to reduce siphoning, which is usually not a problem with pickling, but just as an FYI, letting them cool at a slower rate will help reduce liquid loss from your jars. So here we go. See how pretty those look, and they're so tasty. That sweet and sour flavor is just yummy. Just make note that the red onions are going to lose a little bit of their color as they are processed. So anyway, just be aware of that they're not going to be super bright red purple like they are when they are raw, but they're still beautiful, and you've got those beautiful spices in the bottom of your jar. Super, super yummy. Great for all of our summer barbecues coming up. One more thing I wanted to make note of: pickles of any kind are always best after they have cured for a bit. Her recommendation from her book was to let these sit for at least 48 hours before enjoying them. I recommend more than that. If you can let them sit for 2 or 3 weeks, even a month or more, they're better. The longer they sit, the better they get. So just be aware of that as well. So I hope you guys will give this recipe a try. If you have any comments or questions for me, please leave them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time. Have a fantastic day.